Welcome to the show, my dear friends. Greg Koukl here, your host on Stand to Reason. And the name means that as a follower of Jesus of Nazareth in the classical tradition of Christianity, that means I hold the classical Christian doctrines and classical Christian values, what C.S. Lewis has described as mere Christianity. I mean, I go further than that, obviously, because I have my own parochial, sectarian kind of convictions about things, but what I defend is the foundational basic thing as an accurate understanding of the way things really are, as an accurate understanding of reality. And since we're called Stand to Reason, that means those convictions I am willing to, metaphorically speaking, stand up and reason for. And sometimes when you stand up, you get in the line of fire, which is all right, because that's the way Christians have comported themselves for years and years and years. One of the things that I don't speak about enough on this show is that not only can you listen to the show, which if you're listening, then you are listening. You're already on board. We have some other things too, like another podcast that I do with Amy Hall, and she adds so much to the enterprise. It's called STR Ask, and you can find this also on our website at str.org. But we also, excuse me, I got the hiccups or something here. We also send out other things, other material we produce, training material, and some of it I'm authoring on a regular basis, indeed something every month. And that would be our bi-monthly publication. I hesitate to call it a newsletter because it's not a newsletter. I mean, you're not going to see pictures of our staff at bake sales and things like that. It's not that kind of newsletter. It's an article I write to help you stay in touch in a thoughtful way with the ideas that are making a difference in the culture. All right? And it's usually about between 3,000 and 4,000 words, and it's not too burdensome, like a chapter, a standard chapter in a book. And I try to give you my best work. In fact, just about every book that you might have read that I have written, each chapter has probably showed up in some form in a Solid Ground, which is the title of the bi-monthly piece we send out, the article. And on alternating months, you get a one-page, what we call a mentoring letter. And the reason is because it's my desire to mentor you. Even at a distance, we're not face-to-face, we don't have the benefit of that kind of relationship, but I've had scores and scores of people tell me that I've been a mentor to them, and this is one of the most satisfying things that I can hear from anyone else, that I have been able to invest myself in some profitable way in their life as a follower of Christ. But those two pieces are the pieces that I use. I mean, apart from this show, which isn't a piece, it's a broadcast. But apart from these are the things that I want to put in your hand every single month, something that will help guide you. But I can't do that if I don't know where you live. And so it's very easy to do this. If you go to our website, you go to str.org, and in the upper right-hand corner, I believe, it says subscribe. Punch the button and follow the prompts, and then we will send you Solid Ground. We will send you my mentoring letters, and you'll probably get a couple other things from us that will help you along your way as a thoughtful Christian in a less than thoughtful culture. Maybe that's the best way to put it. We want to help you be there. We don't want to leave you as orphans. You are not alone. You are members of our community, or if you're not yet, this is the way to become more formally a member. Informally, if you listen to the show, I count you as a member of our community, but we want you to be brought in more tightly as a member. And so that's the way to do it. And we'll send that stuff to you. And now this year I have been I have been pursuing a line of thought right from the very beginning that has been focusing in on my concern about the shift and the change that is happening in the United States of America, principally, but largely in Western civilization. So no matter where you are in the world, you're going to benefit from these series of reflections in the Solid Grounds that came out January and March and May and July, and will be coming out September 1st with the next one. And each one of these is meant to take a step further in laying a foundation for you to understand what is going on in our culture and the tsunami of not only change but of resistance, not only to Christianity, but to the foundational elements of the world as God created it, that Christians are committed to in virtue of that. But even people who are not Christians can see that the world is structured a certain way, and that there is a concerted attempt from all quarters, it seems, to get us to believe lies about the nature of the world in a way that ultimately is going to be destructive for us, not constructive. And it's not just the lies themselves, but the force with which the lies are applied in our culture. The force from our community around us, which has been called a soft totalitarianism. And no, that word is not hyperbole. It is not an exaggeration, and this is a point that I'm making. We are not at total totalitarianism, but we are moving forward in that direction. And it's not just a soft, which is coming from the press and from the academy and from the film industry and all sorts of other gatekeepers of information, but is also coming from little by little, I should say more and more, not little by little, but more and more from the government. So that's hard totalitarianism, the type that we saw in the Soviet system and the type that we saw in the German system in the 30s. And these are not, again, I'm not hyperbolic here. There are a lot of people that came from those circumstances that are former Soviet bloc residents, now emigres to the United States, who are terrified of what they see happening. So much so that even someone like Barry Weiss, who is formerly an editor of the New York Times opinion page, she wrote for them. She doesn't anymore. She resigned because of what she saw them doing with the news. That's Bariwiss. And I cite Barry Weiss because she's no conservative. She's centrist, or probably from most of my listeners' perspective, left of center. And she's a lesbian. And I'm just speaking descriptively here. She's not one of us. What she's doing is describing what she's actually seeing. And when she wrote a letter to resign her post at the New York Times, and I'm including a citation of this in the September Solid Ground. That's why I want you to make sure you sign up for these things. And the backlog of them for this year, or any year for that matter, are on str.org, and certainly the last 4 or 5 of them are on your iPhone or your smartphone app. So get the app, and it's right there. Okay? But this citation is coming up in the September Solid Ground, which I titled The Evening News, because all I'm trying to show you is news items that affirm all that I've been writing about earlier in this year, so you get a candid, or an accurate, and I think will be sobering understanding of the forces that are now upon us. Okay? And in the letter that she wrote to resign from the New York Times, one of the things she said was that when I was having children, my chief concern about the children, or as I look forward in time to the concern I would have as they grew up, was 1, climate change, and 2, the war in Iraq. But now I realize that's not the concern. Now my concern is what I see, and here's her words, quote unquote, creeping totalitarianism. Creeping totalitarianism. So even Barry Weiss, formerly of the New York Times, a respected journalist, is saying, I see totalitarianism on the horizon. And it's not just out there, it's creeping in among us, and it's terrifying. So that's one thing I want you to see. Now, you can't follow that unless you read that. You can get some stuff here, and that's good. Glad you're listening. But if you want the full Monty, so to speak, where I develop the ideas more carefully and give the bib sources and the link-throughs if you get the digital version, then you're going to have to sign up if you haven't already. And str.org, upper right-hand corner, subscribe, and well, ask for it digitally. I'd rather have you get it that way because then you got the quick links and you could pass it on very easily to others. You got to give us your email address, and we need to know your name, and that you'll see there's prompts there. You got to fill out some basic stuff. But it doesn't cost anything, and it's my way of working with you, okay? So that's the first thing I wanted to mention here out of the gates. I also wanted to talk a little bit about a different issue that is, in a certain sense, not entirely different. It's related because of what I see happening inside our Christian communities in virtue of the pressure the culture is putting on the church. Now, a couple of years ago, I wrote a piece that was prompted actually by this show, and I opened my Bible and I see a yellow Post-it in there with a phrase written on there, and the phrase is still there. Faithfulness is not theologically complicated. Faithfulness is not theologically complicated. Now, the reason I wrote that there is because it was clear to me that for many Christians, they were confused on issues that they should not be confused on because, though controversial in our culture, issues like whether Jesus is the only way, or abortion, or marriage, or sexuality, or gender. Very big deals in our culture and important to the Christian worldview. These were issues that the Scripture is not equivocal on. It's a big word. Make no doubt about it kind of thing. The verses or the passages that address these issues are crystal clear as to their meaning. And if anybody disagreed with me, that's fine. I'll show you the passages on any of those topics, and then you tell me what I'm missing as far as the intention of the authors of Scripture are concerned, because at this point, the question is, what does the text mean? What does it say? What does it mean? What kind of worldview is constructed from there? Because I think if you're a Christian, then these are your marching orders. This is your maker's manual or something like that. This tells you what the world's actually like. And I've said many times, we have reality on our side on this, because it isn't as if what we're learning in this book is so strange and does not comport with our basic intuitions about the nature of reality. In fact, when we take these things and understand them clearly, and this is what I tried to do with the story of reality, reality's on our side. That our convictions about the nature of the world actually match the way the world is, and you can see that. It's demonstrable. And by the way, that is the classical definition of truth. When your views about the world actually fit the way the world is. That's called the correspondence theory of truth. It's not a theory. I don't know why they call it that. It is a definition, and it is the definition that almost every one of us uses every single time we make reference to the notion of truth. There's a car burning out in the street. Oh, come on, really? Is that true? Yes, look, see, it's burning. Oh, you're right, it is true. Nobody had to teach you the correspondence view of truth in order to understand what those words meant in that context. Okay? And so as I was talking to my staff today about the press of culture and how many Christians are confused in areas they shouldn't be confused about, and I've been giving this talk recently. I gave it at Cross-Examine Instructor Academy last week at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, Jack Hibbs's church. We got to use part of that facility, and Jack came by and for a session, but we had 60 people we were training with: Frank Turek and Greg Koukl and Elisa Childers and Natasha Crane and J. Warner Wallace and another just amazing faculty. Sean McDowell was there to train these 60. So if that sounds good to you, keep in mind, probably January, February, we'll be announcing CIA number 15 in 2022 when you want to sign up. There's limited enrollment for that. But in any event, here I get a chance to give this presentation where I talk about these 5 things and give passages and lines of argument from Scripture to demonstrate that these should not be controversial in the minds of biblical Christians. Yet it is the case that biblical Christians are getting pulled off here from that. And I want Christians to be faithful to these things. And this relates to a value that we have always had at Stand to Reason. And that value is simply stated faithfulness over results. Faithfulness over results. Now, that statement can be a little confusing. And for example, there might be a confusion when you hear us say that from the beginning, our value has been that we are faithful over results. That means that faithfulness comes first, not results. Because obviously there are churches that have adopted approaches to engaging people and bringing people in and filling their churches, which they think is a good result because they have abandoned being faithful to certain foundational pillars of Christianity. All right? And that's an example where in seeking results, numbers in this particular case, they have not been faithful to the foundational teachings. All right? So that's what I have in mind here. I'll say some more about that in a moment. But there's an example of favoring results over faithfulness. But of course, that doesn't mean that I don't care about results, that I don't care about having an impact. I just don't want the tail to wag the dog. So when I talk about faithfulness, I mean that there is a category of things before the Lord that being consistent with those things and proclaiming those things and believing those things and living those things out are acts of fidelity to Christ. And if we have to abandon some of those things in order to appeal to other people, get more folks in our church, or avoid talking about those things so that people don't leave our church, then that's an example of infidelity to Christ. We care more about what people think of us than what Christ thinks about us, all right? And so that's the concern I have. That's what I'm talking about when I say faithfulness over results, okay? I'm talking about my concerns about those sorts of things. And at Stand to Reason, we're going to stick with the truth, even if it costs us a certain type of result. And what that means is that it is within our capability, it is always within our capability to be successful. Because if our goal is faithfulness, then, and not some external consequence, like certain number of people listening to the radio show or showing up at events or becoming part of Stand to Reason University or going to reality, something like that. Any external thing can be beaten because we can't control all of that. We can work really hard, shoot for a goal, but if it doesn't happen, it may not be within our control to make it happen. And so if that's the way we consider success, then we can be failures if we don't meet those goals, which may sometimes be arbitrary or artificial. But if our goal is to be faithful, regardless of how people respond, and that's our first goal, well, then we can always do that. We can always do that. Now, operating within the broad area of faithfulness, we still want to be effective. So we are concerned with results as long as we don't sacrifice faithfulness. We are concerned with lots of people coming to events and expanding our social media presence and having a lot of folks listening to our radio show and people becoming strategic partners and all of that stuff. But we are not going to pursue those ends in a way that compromises our faithfulness to Christ. So that's one area of misunderstanding I want to clarify. When I say faithfulness over results, I don't mean I don't care about results. What I do mean is I'm not going to try to get results in a way that compromises faithfulness to Christ. And operating within the area of fidelity, we're going to try to do the best we can to get the best results. I think we've been doing pretty good at that, frankly. But there's another element, too, and this has to do with a certain ambiguity in the word faithfulness, because the fact is, who is out there that is not operating as a Christian, even in a certain sense, in the more progressive movements, and even in those areas with people like, say, Matthew Vines in the Reformation Project, who is aggressively promoting what he considers to be a biblically legitimate homosexual agenda. He's a Christian by his self-assessment. And he's advancing standard classical Christianity with the exception that he thinks that homosexuality is fine by God and that we have misunderstood. And then he has a way of characterizing the passages that have classically been offered to inveigh against homosexuality, which are sometimes, I think, uncharitably characterized as clobber verses. And he gives his spin on it. Now, Alan Schleman and I, a number of years ago, wrote a piece, I think it was titled, "A Reformation We Don't Need." We may need a reformation, but not this one. And then we answered point for point every one of Matthew Vine's characterizations of these scriptures regarding the issue of homosexuality, and we showed that he got it wrong every time. All right? And the classical view then stands, which then means that even though, now watch this carefully, even though Matthew Vines thinks he's being faithful, he is not being faithful because he has twisted the actual truth of the matter. And in fact, I think a guy like Matthew Vines qualifies for what Jesus talked about on the Sermon on the Mount, and make that Matthew 6 or 7, and he talked about wolves in sheep's clothing. And remember, wolves in sheep's clothing don't look like wolves. They look like sheep. That's why there's a warning against them, because they look like us in many ways. And so Jesus is warning against those that may appear to be in our fold, sheep, when in fact they are ravenous wolves. And he says that you shall know them by their fruits. But then he goes on to say more about that, because the idea of knowing them by their fruits is not, he does not leave it ambiguous, like we don't really know what he is talking about, all right? Because at the end of that section, which is in Matthew 7:15 and following, he says, many people on that day will say, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name or cast out demons or your name or perform many miracles? And then I will declare to them, watch the words here, I never knew you. Okay, these are the ones he's talking about that are wolves in sheep's clothing. He doesn't know them. They're not his. But notice what he says next. He had been talking about good and bad fruit, but now he characterizes clearly what he means by good and bad fruit. I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. You who practice lawlessness. In other words, the wolves in sheep's clothing are those who look like us but encourage lawlessness, that is immorality, breaking God's law within our midst. And that's what Matthew Vines does. He's encouraging law breaking. God's law regarding sexuality and one woman and one man becoming one flesh for one lifetime. That's Jesus' formula for marriage we get from Matthew 19, and he got it from Genesis chapter 2. Okay? So even though Matthew Vines thinks he's being faithful. And by the way, just for clarification, what I mean by faithfulness here is actually fairly standard and fairly broad, or I should say uncomplicated. Faithfulness is fidelity to the truth. Faithfulness isn't feeling like you're being faithful. It is being faithful. And the only way we can know the difference between feeling faithful and being faithful is the truth that you support or advance, the claims about God that you promote. So how do you know whether you're being faithful to the truth? That's the issue. The issue isn't whether we feel that we're faithful. The issue is that we have the truth, and it is that which we are standing firm on. Now, in those areas I mentioned, Jesus being the only way, abortion, marriage, sexuality, gender, the nature of that talk is there should be no confusion about this, because there is no biblical confusion about this. These are things that are not just any old Christian doctrine, which, by the way, many Christians who love the Lord and are faithful in the foundational sense that I'm referring to may have different ideas about secondary or tertiary issues. Say baptism. Do you baptize adults or baptize infants? We actually have different opinions right on our staff about that. But notice that that's arguably a tertiary issue, third-level issue within the confines of Christianity that has no bearing at all on critical foundational issues. And in fact, that debate has been going on for 2,000 years, almost. But I'll tell you one debate that has not been going on for 2,000 years, the nature of marriage and sexuality and gender and homosexuality. That has not been going on for 2,000 years. That has been going on for 20 years. And the people that are opposing the classical view essentially are saying, now you think about it, we have gotten it wrong for 2,000 years. And we're the ones, the church has, and we're the ones who finally got it right. Now that to me is implausible on its face, right? But the real test is going back to the texts. And when you go back to the text, you find that Jesus said male and female. Going back to Genesis 1 and 2. Male, female, he made them, be fruitful, multiply. You need a male and a female to be fruitful and multiply. No duh. Every place that a male is in view in scriptures, that male is referred to with male pronouns. Every place there's a female, that person is referred to with female pronouns. There is no gender distinction from sexual distinction. Gender and sex are synonyms in the Bible. So this is not in the slightest bit controversial. All you have to do is look and see it. And if you do contend with that, like, say, in the case of Matthew Shepard, he does in some things, well, the problem isn't with the clarity. It's with Matthew Shepard. And then it's fair to say, why doesn't Matthew Shepard see what's obvious, what has been obvious, to almost every other Christian looking at the text for the last 2,000 years? And there's a very simple answer. It's because he's gay. Now, notice I'm not getting the cart before the horse. I'm not saying he's gay, therefore his view is distorted. I'm showing you that his view is wrong by looking at the text. And I could give you more characterization if you wanted it. And then it's fair to ask the question, if he's so wrong, why would he be so wrong on something so obvious? And now we know. Now, maybe it's not that he's gay. In some cases, Christians who are not gay adopt this view, but a whole bunch of other views that the culture is pushing aggressively forward that are not justified by the text. And it's pretty obvious then that they're giving in to the mob. They care more about what the mob thinks of them than what Jesus thinks of them. That's not a good place to be. But here's what I don't want you to miss. When I talk about faithfulness to Christ and fidelity to Christ, I'm not talking about any old faithfulness on any old issue, and all issues are basically the same. I'm saying that there is a canon of basic issues That means that there's an official set of things that define Christianity as Christianity and Christian morals as Christian morals, and these have been the same for 2,000 years because they are well justified unambiguously in almost every case from the text itself. These are what define Christianity. And so when I talk about faithfulness, I mean faithful to those things. Not that there can't be differences in the body of Christ, that some people will have different point of view about certain kinds of things. That happens. But when it comes to a different point of view on a central moral or theological issue, a defining moral or theological issue, then we have to ask ourselves the question, why is there a difference of opinion? And it might be because the text is ambiguous, all right, and then we can be charitable on that. But these issues are not based on ambiguous texts. That's why I wrote faithfulness in that sense is not theologically difficult. It's not complicated. Actually, it may be difficult in light of the press of the culture, but it's not complicated. It's not hard to understand the correct answer to these things if you care about what God says. Now, I want to make another observation, and that is that there are a whole bunch of people who call themselves Christians who are not faithful to these things, but they think they're being faithful. But they do not think they are being faithful to the Bible because they don't think the Bible is God's Word. The progressive church characteristically does not have a high view of Scripture. What they are trying to do is be faithful to love, construed in their way, or faithful to social justice, construed in their way, and they think that's faithfulness to God. I'm talking about being faithful to God's Word and the foundational principles that define Christianity found there. So faithfulness requires that you get the big things right. It's not just a matter of emotional sentiment that you believe you're faithful. It's a matter of whether or not you're faithful to the truth or you have strayed from that for some reason, such that you're bilked into believing that you're being faithful when you're not. And the thrust of that talk, and you can call Darcy, you can call her, you email Darcy at darcy@str.org and say, we want Greg to come out and speak to our group or our church or our event or whatever and give that talk. I will do it. Because to me, it's one of the most important things I can teach right now, and they're simple. On God's view of salvation through Jesus alone, God's view of abortion. And yes, I mean God's view of abortion. You're thinking, well, wait a minute. The Bible doesn't talk about abortion. God gives his view on enough to help us conclude easily that abortion is tantamount to a violation of the commandment against murder. God's view on gender, God's view on marriage, and God's view on homosexuality. These are not hard issues. And therefore, faithfulness nowadays is determined by one's fidelity to those particular things, not a whole bunch of extraneous things that Christians in-house can disagree on amicably, no problem, but to these things that are foundational, defining issues of God's biblical truth and the truth of God's world that he made that matters to the credibility and effectiveness of the Christian worldview. That's the faithfulness that I'm talking about. That's the faithfulness that matters, and that's the faithfulness that is not theologically complicated. I'm Greg Koukl. You're listening to Stand to Reason. All right. Back at you here, Greg Koukl, Stand to Reason, and I misspoke a moment ago when I meant to say Matthew Vines, as I had been referring to for most of this talk. I actually said Matthew Shepard, Matthew Shepard is another individual, homosexual, who, in a certain sense, famously or infamously, was brutally murdered a number of years ago. And, of course, the press made a big deal about this as a hate crime, but it turns out that Matthew Shepard was murdered by another homosexual and strung up on a barbed wire fence and left to die overnight. I mean, he was beaten badly and then left, and he did die. So he was murdered. But I meant to be referring to the same one I was talking about, Matthew Vines, not Matthew Shepard. So I stand corrected. Thank you for my alert staff who caught that mistake. Okay, well, now it's time to chat with you a little bit, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So let's go first to Jack in Seneca. Is that where you want me to go, May? Okay, Amy. Jack in Seneca, South Carolina. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg.
Hey.
So, my question is about Isaiah.
Okay.
I was reading a Bart Ehrman book a while back. It's called God's Problem, about the problem of suffering. And somehow he got into historicity of Isaiah and who wrote that book, which is kind of funny. That kind of strayed from the point of the book. But he was mentioning first Isaiah, second Isaiah, and possibly third Isaiah.
Sure.
I believe he said something about Isaiah, like the latter part of Isaiah being written in Aramaic originally.
I don't think it was written in not Isaiah. That's not my understanding. It was written in Hebrew. There are portions of Daniel that are written in Aramaic, but not much.
Okay, yeah, I think he had crossed over. Okay,
so we've got, in fact, we've got the Isaiah scroll. You can see it if you go to Jerusalem. This is the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's all Hebrew.
Okay, yeah, I got the wrong book then.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he was just talking about the multiple authorship, and I mean, he was kind of making a bigger deal out of it than need be, and he was interpolating plenty of anti-supernatural bias and saying that Isaiah is old because of prophecy, which proves it is old. Which I was just kind of like, okay, that's ridiculous. But I was just wondering, what is the argument for second Isaiah?
Well, could you say that last sentence again before you said what is the argument for? What was that last sentence? I missed that.
Yeah. He was throwing in his own anti-supernatural bias in typical Ehrman fashion.
Okay. Well, this is important. Okay, let me speak to that. First of all, I'm not going to be able to give you a robust answer to your question because, to be honest, that requires a specialist in the Old Testament and more particularly in Isaiah that can go to the issues and all the ins and outs at whatever. And I'm just not equipped to do that. But I can tell you what's going on. And part of it is, like you said, there's an anti-supernatural bias. So when people say, for example, look at the book of Daniel, which we just made reference to. And Daniel has some very dramatic prophecies in it that relate to the rise and fall of entire kingdoms that follow the time of Daniel according to the historical setting, the internal evidence of that book. That is what the book is proclaiming about itself. Okay, and what you have from the time of Babylon, you have the fall of Babylon, you have the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire, then you have the fall of that empire and the rise of the Greek Empire, you have the fall of that and the rise of the Roman Empire. So these are very clearly characterized in the different chapters where that issue is addressed. And it is so clear, and some of the minutiae in terms of the details that are described there are so clear that it almost reads like history written after the fact, okay? So this is the way some people take it. They have a bias against the supernatural. This obviously couldn't have been written when Daniel lived, prior to, Daniel carried away from Jerusalem in 486 or so to Babylon and then become, as a boy, and then became part of the court of three different dynasties, or actually two or three dynasties. And so that couldn't have been the case. It must have been something else because there are things written here that happened later, and that would make those things accurate prophecies which don't happen. So it must have been written later. So you are right that in this discussion there is a bias that is brought to the table that constrains the possibilities of how to look at this. So that's one problem. Okay, and then one has to, it seems to me, justify the bias. And why would you say that this couldn't be genuine prophecy, because prophecy doesn't happen? And why would you say that? Well, it just doesn't. Science, I don't know what they're going to say, frankly. I honestly do not know what they're going to say, because all they can do is just continue to assert their anti-supernatural bias that they bring to the text. Well, this is a scientific world that we live in now. Yes. Well, science is what? Explained everything? No. Science has proven that miracles can't happen? No. That prophecy can't happen? No. So then science what? So this is kind of a dead end. What it amounts to is a bald a priori. That means a prior commitment they bring to the text. And I don't think it's justified. Why don't we let the text speak for itself and be open to the possibilities? That's one thing. Second thing is a discipline that was very popular in the 19th century, especially towards the end of the 19th century, and ruled theological thinking in the first part of the 20th century, called the higher critical method. And the higher critical method basically looked at the linguistic style of different parts of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and then that's just where it's birthed, and then the same techniques got applied in different books like Isaiah. And what they found what they thought were meaningful stylistic differences between different sections of the Pentateuch, and then they drew the conclusion that what explains what they thought were meaningful stylistic differences was evidence of different authors. Now, and so you have the JPED kind of theory of the authors of these different sections of Genesis or whatever. Now, I'm not a specialist in this, so I'm just giving you a very general characterization. I think in Josh McDowell's New Evidence That Demands a Verdict that came out, the most recent iteration of that he did with his son Sean, came out, and with a whole bunch of other researchers, came out a few years, just about 3 years ago. Excuse me, the same year I think that Story of Reality came out, or so, I'm not sure. Maybe it was last year, but in any event, he's got some chapters that work through all of that. If you want to get a more thorough characterization, that book will help you, okay? But let me just suffice it to say that there have been many, many, many scholars who have raised legitimate issues about the technique. Technique being of assigning or attributing different authorship to different sections of the Pentateuch, or frankly any other part of the Old Testament for that matter, based on these different stylistic differences, based on these stylistic differences. And in fact, there have been pieces written to critique the books that advanced these ideas, and they found stylistic differences in those books advancing, like the JPED hypothesis. I hope I got the acronym right. They found stylistic differences in these different chapters, and then they made the claim that the book was not even written by the person whose name is on the book, the author who's advancing this, because obviously it couldn't be that, because look at these stylistic differences. So what they did is they took the roof off there, if you're thinking tactically. They applied that methodology to all kinds of other things where we know they had a unified author. And it's meant to show that this approach is not academically sound. But in the case of Isaiah, as I recall, Isaiah has 3 main sections, and Isaiah is doing different things in each section. And so if you're going to do different things in each section, you're going to have a different voice of sorts, or a different way of expressing yourself, or focusing on a different thing in these different sections. That doesn't mean someone else wrote it. They did the same thing with the book of Deuteronomy, okay? But the Deuteronomy, though, is a book of the law. It's the second giving of the law, Deuteronomos, second law. And it follows the pattern of an ancient treaty, a vassal, a suzerain, a king, and a vassal. And it follows the pattern throughout. And so it shows that there's a unified pattern through the whole thing. How could you say this is written by all these different people when there's a unified pattern? So there's actually an internal evidence argument against the idea that even Deuteronomy is written by different authors, but it doesn't matter because these people are really sold on slicing and dicing the text when there doesn't seem to be a good reason textually to do that. I've written a number of books. So I've written Tactics, for example. I've written The Story of Reality. These have very different literary styles, and I did them different on purpose. You go to Story of Reality, you're not going to find many contractions. I left the contractions out in many cases because I wanted to slow down the pace and I wanted to create a certain sound in your head when you're reading it, all right? Also, there are no breaks like headings. If you go to Tactics, you see these headings in each chapter, just like most books. But you won't find any headings like that in The Story of Reality. Why? Because I was trying to do something different. So as an author myself, I know that I can write different works that have a different voice to them and a different pattern to them because I'm accomplishing different ends with them. Why would we automatically assume that when we find differences like that in biblical literature, whether it's the Pentateuch or some of the prophets like Isaiah, why would we assume that these must be authored by different people? That is the underlying assumption. I think that's the problem here. So I'm not, like I said, I can't go into a precise defense of the unified authorship of Isaiah, but I can tell you this is what I think shell game, the sleight of hand that a lot of academics have used, which, by the way, is kind of out of date. It's about 100 years old, and a lot of people who are scholars have moved away from that because it's not a reliable way of assessing the text. Yet those proponents are still around, and so you're going to run into them on occasion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'd encourage you to, if you want more depth, do a little deeper dive in these ideas. Go to, say, for example, Josh McDowell's book, Evidence, the most recent iteration of Evidence that demands a verdict, and you'll have plenty there to look at. And he'll have lots more bib sources if you want to follow through on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're so welcome. Glad to chat with you. I'm looking at the clock. I'm just going to go to another caller because we don't have that much time, and I'll only get one of you this hour, and looks like I'm going to get Daniel next hour. But let's talk with Chad in Louisville, Kentucky. Chad, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, thanks.
So quickly, just trying to convince my 16-year-old son, would like to take him to Reality in Augusta in April. And I've already asked him, point out, would you like to go? And he has no interest. How would you go about trying to convince him? And obviously, I'm trying to train my son as I'm supposed to do. So,
sure.
And I want him to get this information.
Right, I'm with you. I get that. And your son's not motivated, so it isn't a native interest of his at the moment.
Correct.
Yeah, because there's a lot of young people that are absolutely chomping at the bit for that. In fact, we're still 4 weeks or so away from, I'm just looking at my watch. Yeah, we're about 4 weeks away from Southern California, and what are my numbers? We have 1,400 already. 1,400 for Orange County. So a lot are chomping at the bits, but I'm totally sympathetic to you about that. My own kids are not especially thrilled about sitting through some of that stuff, and maybe they've seen enough of it and it's just blasé to them. But I understand your point, and so I do have a suggestion. I mean,
Okay.
there's a sense that you can't exactly push the river, all right?
Right.
And if you just said, I'm going to make you go there, and then they're going to be mad, because they'd have to obey whatever. But you could, and look, this some people may not like this idea, but it just occurred to me. You could bribe them. I'm not kidding. Okay, son, you want to make $50? And by the way, maybe $50 isn't much to your son, so you might have to up the ante a little bit. But
Right.
here's the deal: if you go to reality, here's the way to do it. Probably, if you go to reality, and you write a 1-paragraph summary of each of the sessions you attend. All right, a 1-paragraph summary of each of the sessions you attend. I will give you $10 per summary.
Okay.
Now, this might set you back a C note, all right, $100.
Yes, sir.
But it might get him there.
Okay.
And it may turn out that now he's got to concentrate about what's going on, or else he's not going to get the money.
Right.
And you're going to have to decide, too, if that kind of money is enough to motivate your kid. If not, you might up the ante, or you just might forget it. I don't know.
Okay.
But, I know of people who have said to their kids, if you want to get this or that or the other thing, for every book that you read, and do a précis, like a summary of the book, a page or two that shows that they've got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you $5 or $10 or something. And if you read like a king, you'll drive like a king. Kind of idea there. If you read like a bum, you'll drive like a bum or whatever. So, and that has worked in some people's cases, that they give an artificial incentive or a monetary incentive for the kids to read books and do something that shows that they got to at least communicate some of the information to someone else, like a précis, Precis. It's like a summary.
Uh-huh.
And then if they have to do that to get paid, well, they're at least processing the information, and it may be worth your $10 a course. Now, if they don't want to do it, I honestly don't know what else you could say. You could say, all right, if they are that set against going that they won't earn $10 per hour sitting through a thing and writing a little summary, then that person is really against it, and it probably will do more harm than good to demand that they go.
Okay.
That's
right.
That's just my impulse, or not impulse, my instincts about this.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think $10 would work on him. I mean, he is employed right now, so I would definitely have to up the ante.
Uh-huh.
The other I have tried, and it has worked in the past. Just simply saying, look, it would mean a lot to your dad. And he's one of these kids. I'm very proud of him. He's a 16-year-old who actually likes to hang out with his parents.
Oh, that's really sweet. Wow.
And I know that's rare. So, and we have a fantastic relationship. So
Super.
I've tried that in the past. I may try that again, but I just wanted your thoughts. I'd really like him to get this information. I'm trying to, maybe get some junior high and high school kids from the church.
Sure.
Down there as well.
And where are you from? Are you from that area?
I'm from Louisville. No, I'm from Louisville.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Drive,
I can see it right here. Okay, I got another thought here. By the way, that's magnificent. I think that's just magnificent. I got about 60 seconds
Sure.
To kind of wind this down here. But so I really applaud that. I like that. That's better than buying them off. That's appealing to your relationship in an appropriate and a sweet way. But you can also, I think you can sweeten the pot a little bit for him by saying, look, I'm going. I would love for you to go, to be with me. And also, it means a lot to me that you're at least exposed to this stuff. We don't have to talk about it afterwards if you don't want. You don't have to believe it if you don't want. That's okay. But it would mean a lot to me if you would come with me and sit in the sessions, to be together and to at least on your own think about the ideas. And, we'll stay a couple extra days and we'll go to, whatever, pick up something fun thing to do, go to Disneyland or whatever, kind of thing, and say, we're going to make it a fun time together, you and me. What do you think? So there you're leveraging that particular point that you made, that your relationship, it's a genuine appeal to be together with him. And it makes it more fun for him that you're going to do more than just do this deal. You're gonna go somewhere on Sunday or maybe Monday and do some other things and have a road trip together and whatever. So I mean that's the best I can suggest. I'm really proud of you for mentioning this though, Chad, because I think it's a much better suggestion than buy them off. So trade on the relationship. So that's super good, and I suspect that would be the most productive way with my little adjustment added to it. So thank you so much, Chad, and thanks for your concern for your boy and the great relationship you have with them. Got to run though. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Give them heaven, friends. Bye-bye now.